So my name is Miia Sainio. I'm from University of Turku, and I've been working with the KiVa program since 2007. In this presentation, I'm talking about implementation of the program in the long run. And I think it's very inspiring. It has been very inspiring being here in the conference, because this seems to be a topic of interest of many other teams. Although bullying prevention program, they're doing exactly the same thing, trying to capture how to sustain. So we have very good programs. We have good evidence from the randomized control trial, and we know that it works. But how to sustain it, and do the schools actually continue using it? And I think we are at a different phase now. We have done the programs, we have evidence, we have effects, but now we need to know how to make it happen in the long run to sustain the good practices. So KiVa started basically 2007 when we had the randomized control trial, and then 2009 we started to implement it in all Finland. So we were traveling around Finland training teachers, and since from that on it's been quite well implemented over all the country. I'm not talking about what KiVa involves, because we have a workshop tomorrow at 10:15. Mari Kontio, Sanna Herkama, and Tiina Turunen are giving it. So if you are interested in the program contents, you may listen there. And yesterday I was giving my colleague's presentation, Silja Saarento's presentation, already showing the trends of victimization and bullying. So when we start, this is not actually the 2009, but this baseline is when school starts KiVa program. And it seems that the first year is the most significant. They get good effects. The victimization and bullying are decreasing for the first year when they start. And the trend seems to be that the longer they go, the year 7 schools are here, and these schools are the ones that started 2009. So we have some schools that have been using the program 7 years, and the trend goes down. And overall, I calculated for the last spring that 92% of Finnish schools, when I took into account all the schools that had been closed, so we had 92% of schools registered to the program, which is quite a good job. So we have almost all Finland covered. But we know that not all schools are using it, and we are trying to find out how it goes. So now I'm trying to find out which schools are sustaining it, which schools are dropping out. And the only way we can get information are this monitoring tool. So schools are answering to surveys every spring. Students are answering, all students from the school. They respond to questions about bullying, victimization, atmosphere. Also, they answered to some questions on implementation. Is KiVa used in your school? We have teacher survey. So the teachers who are giving KiVa lessons for the students, they are answering the survey every spring, or we hope that they are answering every spring to tell what they have done. Have they done the lessons, and how many lessons they have actually done? And then we have the school level survey, which is supposed to be answered by one person who coordinates the KiVa activities in the school to know what they are doing. Are they planning their activities? Are they informing their staff members, for instance? And I have the trend data of how they respond. So the blue bar are the schools registering to KiVa program, and we can see that between 2009 and 2011, the most schools registered. Then it was free for them to register. And even after then, it's been increasing to reach the 90% from Finland. However, the green line shows that the answering to the questionnaire, first it seems to be very high. So almost all schools that started 2009 answered to the baseline survey, but then it seems to start decreasing compared to the schools that are involved. And even worse is the staff surveys, which are the purple and black lines. So we are trying to know what they do, asking the staff members whether you are implementing a program, but they are not giving the information by not responding. And we actually have some schools that never respond. I call them ghosts, because we don't have what they do in the schools. We don't have any information about them. So in this study, I tried to find out profiles of implementation, what kind of profiles we can find, and also try to find some predictors, what would predict the persistent implementation of a school-based program. For the study, I chose only the schools that started very early, because I wanted to have a long-term sustainability captured. So I chose only the schools who started 2009 or 2010. I still had 1,000 and almost 900 schools. And there were some, all schools types in Finland are represented here. Average school size was 230 students. And actually, I've done this, I did 2013 already did some kind of profiles with the schools. I did some kind of coding by hand so that I found schools that were never responding, those who seems to persist, and those who decreased. But I got inspired by one study by McIntosh and colleagues who were looking at another school-based program profiles. So I did a similar model, latent class analysis, to find the different profiles from the student survey, whether they respond or not to the survey. And I ended up with a 4-group solution, because it's not, when we look at the fit indexes, there is some turning point, but it's also theoretically somehow sound to have the 4-group solution, so it somehow made sense, so I stayed with that. And what we had about 40% of schools, the green line, who had a high probability, this is the probability of responding, they had very high probability of responding every single year. They didn't respond every single year, but most of them did, and it seems that it's likely that they respond. I call them persistent. So this is the interesting group. What makes them persist? Then we have 2 groups of decreasers, which I didn't find when I did this by hand, calculating a kind of code that when schools drop out. But we have 2 types. We have the ones that decrease slowly. I call them tail-offs. And then we have the rapid, like fast decreasers who kind of drop off very early on. After the first KiVa year already, they seem to quit responding. And then we have the yellow group, which seems to drop and then raise again. I call them awakened. So they are maybe doing something and sometimes not quitting completely, and then a kind of raising again awareness, okay, we could do KiVa. So this is my assumption. And then we have the coasts, which are not in the model because I don't have much data on them. And I wanted to look at what predicts them to be persistent schools or dropping out. So I thought that school type may be one reason. So primary schools are maybe more likely to persist, because we have already evidence that in primary school KiVa works better. We have better results. Also, we have the feeling that in primary school it's easier to adapt because of the homeroom system. So the one teacher is giving the lesson, so it has been somehow easier to adapt there. And based on the other school-based program studies, it seems that middle schools are more likely to abandon the programs. Also, I was expecting that larger schools would be more likely to persist, so when they have more students. And this is actually also what this McIntosh found in their study. And he was hypothesizing that they have more resources. And I have also the feeling when I visit schools that large schools need to coordinate. So when they come involved with the program, they need to do some coordination to be able to do anything. And that coordination may lead to higher, more persistent use of the program. And about the other predictors, so I thought many kind of predictors, but one that I thought that it's very important is the planning. Planning the activities could lead to sustainable actions. Thinking already the same, at least in Finnish we say that half done is, well planned is half done. So it's part that when school is doing the planning, it's maybe sustaining better. And we had 4 questions from the staff survey that we tried to capture whether they plan or not their activities, asking whether they plan, to whom they give the lessons, when the KiVa team tackles the cases of bullying, and so on. And another question was from the students' side. So I wanted to know whether awareness of KiVa program is related to persistence in program, sustaining the program. And I even wanted to do it so that if students are aware in the beginning, if the school managed to make the students aware from the very beginning, that may be the key that leads to sustaining the program. Because raising the awareness from the very beginning could be an indicator that the program is well incorporated in the school culture. So I needed to take into account the starting level and also the changes by time. And here are the very preliminary findings. And as for the school type, a bit against what we expected, primary schools were less likely to be persistent. So they were actually more likely to drop out of the program or not responding. But large schools, in turn, were more likely to be persistent compared to, the likelihood to being persistent was higher for the middle schools, or large schools, sorry. And we can see that the coasts and the drop-offs were the small schools, so it was more likely that they had the small schools that they were dropping out. When we look at just the average across the year with the planning and awareness of students of the KiVa schools, we can see that the average is higher for the persistent schools. So it seems that the planning is related to persistence, and also awareness is related to persistence. And then now I must confess that I run into problems with analyzing the logistic or multinomial logistic regression analysis. So even this morning, M+ was suggesting that don't trust the results. So now I decided that I'm not giving the non-trusty, like the results that I cannot trust based on M+, but I give the one I put in the model only the school size, and I wanted to look at the intercept and slope of the awareness to make the difference between the beginning of the initial awareness compared to the change in the awareness by time, so that we can say that the initial awareness is something that predicts sustainable development, and maybe even that the persistent schools are higher in awareness by time. And this is what the model shows, and this is consistent across the models that didn't work. So it seems that schools that are in the persistent group, which is the reference group here, start higher. So after the first year of KiVa, their students are more aware of KiVa being in their school. And their slope is also, the slope of awareness tends to decline. So all schools tend to decline in implementing KiVa program, but the persistent schools decline less than the other schools. So both initial level is related to persisting and also the slope or the change in awareness. So to conclude, in a way I think that we are in a good situation. We have a lot of persistent schools that we want to understand why they persist, why they keep going on with the program. It seems that middle schools and larger schools are slightly more likely to persist. It seems that planning can be the key of persisting. Planning well, coordinating well in the beginning is probably the key to sustaining the actions. And also making the program incorporated in the culture of the school from the very beginning is probably important to have more persistent schools in program use. So differing from my hand calculation of the different profiles, the statistical model gave me two kinds of decreasers. And I think it was very interesting to see that the McIntosh and colleagues study, which I was inspired about, had very similar profiles. They also had the fast decreasers and then the slower decreasers. And he wrote in the paper that year 1 and year 3 are probably the critical time points of dropping out, or critical time points when we need to support the schools. And I think it was very inspiring that I found the same from our profiles. It was after first year when most of the drop-off started to drop out, and after the third year when the tail-off started to drop out. So as a program implementers, these time points may be the most critical when the schools need the support from us. And actually, now we are interviewing teachers and schools about KiVa program use, and I have done only one interview myself, and it actually supported this view, because they said, when we asked them, when the KiVa came part of your school, when you felt that it started to work well, and they said it was third or fourth year. So it's a long-term, it takes a time to take the program into use. It's not the first year. You get the effects in the first year, but really incorporate the program in your system, in the school culture, that takes time. It takes probably 3-4 years, and then maybe it's sustaining. And this is actually from the McIntosh paper, and I also got a bit enthusiastic about it because we found very similar profiles, and I'm very interested to see in the future from the other programs, are we finding this kind of trends? The first and the third year are the critical points. So I think this needs more studies and more to look at that, whether if it's really something that school-based programs are working like this. In 2013, when I did the hand calculation, I did ask schools that why did you drop out? I sent email surveys to hosts, those who never responded, and also the ones who seemed to decrease. Not all of them had abandoned the program. Actually, some of them were using it. But many had abandoned it, and the main reason was own practices. And actually, many of them said that we did use KiVa. We picked the parts that felt appropriate for us, and now we are using with our own way, so applying it for their system. It may be good that they are applying, they are modifying it in their use, but of course we need to know what they do, and it would be good that they monitored. Does it really work? Are they doing a good job? I think Donna Cross said very nicely that it's not the cherry picking only. We need to figure out what the need is. So if schools just cherry pick the best part that feels good for them, that's not necessarily enough. But we need to understand what they need, what is the component what they would need to use, and that's not necessarily the easiest component that feels good. They also said, I think this is in line with my findings now with the statistical terms, that small schools dropped out easily. They felt that this kind of systematic program is too heavy for their use. Some special education schools said that they use some components, but they applied very much. Many said that staff changes, influences, that the key persons go away. We don't have training, for instance, that we don't really have the people who would keep it up in our school. So overall lack of coordination. Some mentioned resources, but they were not necessarily money resources. It was more time, or usually it was about time, that we just don't have the persons to do it. Of course, I think we are in the beginning to really understand the sustainability of program use in the schools, and we need to study more. In this study, the limitation is that we use the responding to questionnaire, and of course, it's not for sure that responding is really meaning that they are not using. At least it's not an indication of high fidelity. So we need to know more about the schools, whether they do it well or not so well. And of course, the small schools, for instance, some of them actually said that they don't have the computers, so that's why they are not answering. So that can be something that explains the small school dropout. Okay, and of course we need to study more about the question. I had only few predictors in the model, but we need to understand what predicts the sustainability and try to find how to support the schools to maintain the practices. Yes. Thank you.